Now witness the firepower of this fully armed and operational battle station.
There's insanity in the control room.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the show. I am Jeff Waldorf, logically left here, and I've got, look, I got a great show, but also terrible stories. So it's gonna be a rough one today. We are starting off the week with some pretty disastrous stories. We've got the big nasty bill that's incoming. Turns out not very popular, but don't worry, it'll still pass. Wait, what? Why would I say don't worry? What do you mean? How could something that's so unpopular pass? I'm gonna break it down. Then we have the Supreme Court that has agreed to hear an appeal in order to end election spending limits. So I'm gonna break down the details of that. But guess what? We may end up having even more corporate money in politics. That's right. And more coordination between PACs, billionaires, and political parties. So here we go. Even more chipping away at what little limits there are on corporations and wealthy people buying our elections. So, yeah, it's disastrous. We also are going to talk about an update to the election lawsuit happening in Rockland County, New York. We got ICE impersonators, big problem there. And then Amazon discriminating against the disabled. We've got a report on that as well. So labor. And there you go. I mean, that's, again, a lot of disastrous news to pack into today's show on a Monday. But, we got to do what we got to do. We got to report the news. And that just happens to be the news of the day. Now, before I dive into it, please like and share the stream. It's very important that you do so. It helps us out. Now, another way to help us out, of course, is to join our channel membership program on YouTube, just like Marie Denise, who signed up as a basic supporter. Thank you, Marie. Thank you, Jaria1286. And also thank you to IOUEL, a supporter as well. So those are the supporters on our membership on YouTube. So thank you to those individuals, those folks, for supporting independent progressive media. Also, I want to go over to our Patreon. That's another way to support the show. Patreon.com/JeffWaldorf. You can support the show by signing up there to become a patron and support what we do here. Let's see. I'm trying to load up the page right now. So to thank a couple of new members here, I'll have to thank them later on throughout the show because it currently is not loading. So that's what happens here. All right. Let's get to it though, and start out with the first story of the day: the big nasty bill. It's supposed to be big and beautiful, but I see nothing beautiful about it. So let's dive into the updates about that. President Donald Trump's big nasty bill that guts Medicaid and the SNAP program, food stamps, in order to give massive tax cuts to the richest Americans, has advanced through the House and is now in the Senate, currently facing a vote-o-rama session in which, of course, lawmakers can offer their own amendments to make it possibly even more horrid, or in some cases, perhaps less so, which will immediately get shot down. Now, look, this bill is expected to pass, but by a very thin margin, of course, on party line votes. Okay. They're not going to do the filibuster. Democrats are unable to do the filibuster because Republicans have structured it in such a way to only need a simple majority. Now, they can only afford to lose about 3 votes. And so, of course, what are they going to do? They're going to try to get them by being even more cruel. That's right. Because, again, some of the Republicans who are like, I don't know if I can vote for this. It adds too much to the deficit, which means it is not cruel enough towards the poor. We're going to have to come after them even more. Yes, I'm not kidding. Senator Rick Scott, famous for doing Medicare fraud, by the way, in Florida, and his friends, on Sunday introduced an amendment that they would present, of course, during the vote-a-rama, which would prevent new enrollees in Medicaid expansion states from receiving something called the 9-to-1 enhanced federal medical assistance percentage if they are not disabled and don't have dependent children. Okay. Now, again, for Medicaid, in some of the states that were expanded, you still have to be poor and working, okay, because most people that are on Medicaid are working. They're the working poor. Okay. They still, again, don't make enough money from the job that they are doing to be able to afford health insurance on their own. So they have to get on Medicaid. Well, again, the Republicans are looking to cut the number of people who are non-disabled adults without children, but who are still too poor to afford Medicare or Medicaid on their own or healthcare on their own. They're going to say, you know what? Tough luck, guys. You're screwed. Doesn't matter that you're working. We're going to get rid of your healthcare. And that would end up cutting Medicaid spending by more than $300 billion. And by the way, that provision itself has the support of Senate Majority Leader John Thune. Okay, so again, this is very likely to end up getting into this final bill. Not only that, but Senators Suzanne Collins of Maine and Lisa Murkowski, as well as Josh Hawley, who said, "Oh, we're not in favor of these deep Medicaid cuts. I mean, that would actually hurt our voters." Well, don't worry. They'll be, they're still going to support this bill. They voted to advance the bill after they were promised waivers for their own states. So, this will affect a lot of people, except in these key states that we have allowed to have a waiver from some of these Medicaid cuts. So, look, it looks like there's a very good chance that we're getting this piece of crap rammed down our throats. Okay, get ready for the big nasty bill. And that is despite the fact that this is extremely unpopular. In fact, look, the polling on this has been disastrously bad. CNN recently covered it, and, well, let me show you the clip.
Awful. They think it's horrible. And to quote our colleague Charles Barkley, terrible, terrible, terrible. What are we talking about here? Well, let's take a look at the net favorable rating on the big, beautiful bill. I don't just got one poll for you, Omar. I got 5 of them, and the net favorable rating, minus 19 points, Washington Post, minus 20 points, Pew Research Center, Fox, minus 21, Quinnipiac University, minus 26, KFF, minus 29. You don't have to be a mathematical genius to know that when the net favorable rating of your bill is somewhere between minus 19 and minus 29 points, that it is not a positive bill as viewed by the American public. The American public at this particular point hate the big, beautiful bill. As far as they're concerned, it's not a big, beautiful bill. It's a big, bad bill.
Look, man, this bill is an absolute disaster. It's going to be a disaster for the most vulnerable people. And guess what? That is by design. Okay? It is designed to hurt vulnerable people in order to help the rich. That's kind of the whole point. That's kind of the whole point of the Republican Party. They are a money funneling scheme to the wealthiest Americans from people, working people, from what's left of the middle class. There are barely any people left in the middle class, but it's mostly from the working poor. Okay? And look, Here's the thing, too. More polling on this. According to a survey conducted in April by the New Republic, who asked a representative sample of about 950 registered voters about the wealth distribution in this country, it showed that the American people had a broad frustration with how wealth is distributed in this country, specifically the extreme concentration of wealth among the super rich. Asked which the following statements comes closest to your view on how wealth is distributed in this country today, 72% of survey respondents, including 45% of those who voted for Trump in 2024, chose, quote, the rich have too much. That's right. 45% of Trump voters are like, rich people got too much money. Yeah, okay, yes. Now, 6% said the poor have too much. What? That doesn't make any sense. But what? Imagine being the 6% of who looks at a poor person and says, "You got too much. You got too much. We need to tax you more." They're poor. What do you think they have? It's psychotic. Absolutely psychotic. And then 22% said, well, things are about fair the way they are. And 22% of people who have obviously no clue what the hell is going on and what they're looking at, and are probably pretty well off themselves. Okay? No, everything's fine. I'm doing great. Oh, okay. Well, if that's the metric, all right then. Look, few respondents across party lines said that they believed that the richest 0.1% and 1% were paying their fair share in taxes, according to the survey. 66% said that they think the wealthiest Americans are paying too little in taxes. Yes, this is it. That is true. They are paying too little in taxes, okay? Look, this bill, however, makes that worse. It would let the rich pay even less in taxes. The Institute on Taxation and Economic Policy has estimated that the package would deliver $124 billion in net tax cuts to the richest 1% of Americans in 2026. Yeah, $124 billion just in 1 year in tax cuts for the rich. It's the heist, man. It's the heist. Get ready. Get ready for it. Okay, reaching into your pocket and giving it to the rich. That's it. That's the only way to describe what's going on here. They're gutting Medicaid, health care for the poorest people, and giving it to the rich. And of course, they're lying about the reason. Oh, no, we got to do waste. We got to go after waste, fraud, and abuse, which is happening at very, very low, very negligible levels, by the way. And most of the actual fraud is being perpetrated by giant corporations that will screw over the system, people on Medicaid or Medicare, and then and they'll make money off of it. They make money off screwing the government and taking taxpayer money. And yet you're going to punish the people, the poor people that are on it that need this healthcare to survive? Now, this is reverse Robin Hood. So now you might be wondering then, why do I think that this is going to pass? I mean, are you paying attention? It's because the rich run the place. They run Congress. They own everything. This should not be a surprise to you if you have been paying attention. You got to follow the money. Follow the money. And look, we've known about this for a very, very long time, okay? Years ago, Professors Martin Gillens of Princeton and Benjamin Page of Northwest... Excuse me. Let me start that again here. A little frog in my throat there. Years ago, Professors Martin Gillens of Princeton and Benjamin Page of Northwestern University published a paper pointing out that the United States, that our government is an oligarchy. It is an oligarchy. They compared what the public wanted to do to what government actually did, and found out that, the opinions of 90% of Americans, the majority, the vast majority, have essentially no impact at all on what legislation Congress passes. That's right. In fact, this is a Princeton paper, okay? Princeton study. The preferences of the average American appear to only have minuscule, near zero, statistically non-significant impact upon public policy. What does have influence, they found? Well, money. Of course it does. Money, that's it. The economic elites, the business interests, the people who can afford the lobbyists, they have all the influence. The moneyed interests always get what they want. The so-called right-wing populists aren't actually really populists. They continue to give the rich everything that they want. Donald Trump, Josh Hawley, all of them. The majority of Congress, they always give everything to the rich because they are who fund them. That's the reality. I mean, you've got, politicians who get legalized bribes from these corporations. Look, and by the way, that's why it takes so much money to actually run and win. To win a Senate seat, even back in 2014, candidates had to raise about $14,000 a day. That number has only increased in the years since. And since just 0.5% of Americans, 0.5%, typically donate more than $10,000, in any election, you know exactly who they're going to represent when they win. That's why the terrible polling is not going to stop this bill. It's not. The only way to actually stop it is to stop voting for people who take donations from big corporations and super PACs. But considering how that's how most people get their funding, there you go. We're not going to be saved by Republicans who turn against this bill. For example, Tom Tillis, right? Tom Tillis. He's like, this bill sucks. Okay. He said that the bill will gut Medicaid, which is true, and that Trump is betraying his voters. Quote, I'm telling the president that you have been misinformed. You supporting the Senate mark will hurt people who are eligible and qualified for Medicaid. Trump, he wasn't misinformed. Okay. No. And neither was anyone else. This was a plan all along. Lie to their voters and pass tax cuts for the rich. That's the reality. Everyone in Congress knows it. So, of course, they're not going to save us. They're not going to save us. And neither will the parliamentarian. Okay? Parliamentarian, they're going to ignore the parliamentarian. Look, even if this does get slowed down, they're still going to find a way to ram this thing through. Okay? Because at the end of the day, it's not only that Trump wants it, of course, but it's also, more importantly, what the donors want. And the donors almost always get what they want. Yes, that study was pre-Trump. That was back in 2014. And so even pre-Trump, it was bad, but it's actually, now it's much worse. And the next story is going to show you that the potential for things getting even worse is there. Get ready for this. Will they ram it through by July 4th? I don't know about the timing, but let me tell you what. At some point, they are going to ram this thing through. Whether it be by July 4th or not, we're going to get the big nasty bill. All right. All right. In what will likely continue to mean the end of democracy. I know, it's amazing that we still kind of even have one. But no, it's going to end even more. The extremist Supreme Court has agreed to hear a challenge from the Trump administration or regime and the GOP to completely eliminate limits on how much political parties can spend during elections. On Monday, the 3 hand-picked Heritage Foundation judges, along with their corrupt predecessors that continue to be on the court, Thomas, who was corrupt, said that they plan to review an appellate ruling that upheld a provision of federal election law that had been previously upheld in 2001, which held in place spending limits on elections. Without those limits on party spending, of course, large donors would be able to skirt the caps on individual contributions to a candidate by essentially directing unlimited sums of money to the party with the understanding that the money will be spent on behalf of the candidate. So now this case is going to be argued in the fall, which is ironic because perhaps then that will herald the final fall of our system of government. Richard Hasen, an election law expert at the University of California, Los Angeles Law School, has already predicted that the court will end up striking down the limits, considering how, since 2005, the court has been chipping away at federal laws and rulings that basically tried to prevent rich people from purchasing our government. Didn't exactly work. I mean, let me give you an example of some of those. McConnell versus FEC, of course. Before that, Citizens United, which is really, opened the floodgates here. But then, of course, previously you had decisions like Bellotti versus First Bank, Buckley Vallejo. All of those things have laid the groundwork for billionaires being able to come in and purchase our elections. Now, Hasen wrote that the SCOTUS striking down these limits, which he predicts, may even make sense legally. Now, he says that in light of the prevalence of the super PAC spending that has, in his mind, undermined political parties and done nothing to limit, and in fact, increased corruption and inequality. So let me be clear, he's not in favor of this, right? He's just pointing out that, kind of like how McCutcheon made legal sense after Citizens United, now you've got this one that's going to legally make sense after all those other limits were struck down. So I guess this is just following that pattern of getting rid of all the checks against billionaires coming in and buying our elections. So there's that. Now, the Republican committees for House and Senate candidates had filed the lawsuit back in Ohio in 2022, joined by then Senator J.D. Vance, who is now vice president, and then Representative Steve Chabot. So there it is. This is almost the last of any of the limits left on political spending by large donors and corporations. Now, I know that there are still individual limits, right? But after this case, if they win, and it's almost certainly likely for this court to strike down these limits, those ones are next. So there you go. And then we will have completely unlimited, unfettered corporate money and billionaire money in our politics, which is probably part of the plan to ensure that Democrats never win another election again. And it is kind of funny and a little ironic in that case, because actually in this last election, Kamala Harris raised $1 billion. And so she actually had more money. But then again, outside independent expenditures for Trump were actually incredibly high as well. Even if the Trump the Trump campaign actually raised less money. And so these independent expenditures really do make the difference here. And it's going to get far, far worse. Look, these candidates are going to be able to blanket the airwaves with nonstop political ads, funded directly in conjunction now with their billionaire backers to lie about the opposition, which they did in this election, while lying about their own candidates as they continue to pass more tax cuts for themselves. And this comes, by the way, as the global elite has actually increased their wealth by $33 trillion over the last 10 years. An Oxfam report published on Wednesday of last week found that the richest 1% globally have actually seen their wealth surge by more than $33.9 trillion over the past decade, with just 3,000 billionaires accounting for the $6.5 trillion of that increase. And there we go. They have been hoarding the wealth for themselves. And now Republicans are getting ready to pass yet another tax bill that cuts their taxes as the Supreme Court gets ready to allow even more corporate and billionaire money to flood into our electoral system. I wish I could say this is a result of a broken system, but in reality, this system is working exactly as intended. The rich continue to get richer as they use mass corporate media to confuse low information voters into supporting the very people who are actually screwing them over. Look, they're sitting there pointing the finger at immigrants and trans people and talking about all waste, fraud, and abuse as they continue to rob all of us. And the worst thing is that nobody from either party is going to come save us. Republicans, obviously, they're pushing for this. Even members of their so-called populist right, like Josh Hawley, are pushing for this. Pushing for the big nasty bill and being okay with the Medicaid cuts for other people. But what about the Democrats? What about the Democrats? Democratic leadership right now is too busy attacking Zohran Mamdani. That's what they're doing. They're going after Mamdani, who has openly said that billionaires should not exist. Mamdani just won a primary against Andrew Cuomo, the face of the establishment. If that's not a rebuke, I don't know what is. But no, the Democratic leadership, Hakeem Jeffries is looking at this like, I don't know about this one. Oh, he's a socialist. Can't do that. I mean, he's refusing to endorse Mamdani. What are you talking about? Blue no matter who? I thought that's what you were screaming the whole time. Blue no matter who. Vote blue no matter who. And yet, when it comes to Mamdani, you got those same people in Democratic leadership saying, I can't really vote blue no matter who. We might have to go for Eric Adams or Cuomo. We might go for Cuomo, who I don't know if he's going to enter the race, but if he does, he's going to do it as an independent. And of course, Eric Adams is already an independent. So, I mean, blue no matter who. Blue no matter who. Nope. No, not if he is an actual progressive. Can't do it. And by the way, last Thursday, billionaire hedge fund manager Bill Ackman, a Trump supporter, announced that he would lavishly fund any candidate who emerged to challenge Mamdani in a general election. Ackman said that large amounts of donor money would pour in for any candidate who could take on Mamdani's proposals for affordable housing, healthcare, food, and transportation in the city. So it's very likely that Ackman is going to obviously either fund the Republican candidate, which makes sense to me, or Andrew Cuomo if he ends up getting into the race, or Eric Adams. I mean, could do either of those. Okay. So that's just an example. If you hated the huge amounts of corporate money in our elections before, and most of you do, get ready to see even more of it come the fall, thanks to our extremist, far-right Heritage Foundation Supreme Court. And there it is. Disastrous. Moving on. I have an update for the potentially explosive lawsuit that is questioning the accuracy of the 2024 election. The plaintiffs in the case have actually begun submitting documentation as part of discovery. Smart Legislation, the action arm of the nonpartisan watchdog group Smart Elections, submitted a series of questions as well as documentation to the Rockland County Board of Elections in New York last week. Lulu Freestadt, the founder and executive director of Smart Legislation, said in a statement to Newsweek that, quote, the best way to reassure the public about the accuracy of the election results in Rockland County, New York, is to conduct a full, transparent, hand recount of the 2024 presidential and Senate elections. That is why we have requested it, and so far the judge seems to agree. Now, on the other side, of course, you had a spokesperson for the Rockland County telling Newsweek that it had filed a motion to dismiss, which, by the way, includes a request for a stay of all discovery. Now, wait a minute here. That, to me, is kind of interesting. Why would you want to stay discovery, then? I mean, if you want to prove that the election is on the up and up and that this case has no merit, then wouldn't you submit documentation to support your side and say, look, there wasn't any issues with the Rockland County results, and so therefore you don't need to do this case? But no, they don't want to show that. Now, the lawsuit here is claiming that there were irregularities in these voting machines, not just in Rockland, but in places all across the country. The complaint had cited numerous statistical anomalies in the election results, including that in multiple districts, where hundreds of voters had chosen, for example, the Democratic candidate Kirsten Gillibrand for Senate. However, none of them, zero, I'm talking zero, voted for former Vice President Kamala Harris. That is bizarre. That's very bizarre. That's very strange. And the complaint also said that more voters had sworn in legal affidavits that they had voted for an independent U.S. Senate candidate, Diane Sayre, who was also a plaintiff, than the Board of Elections had counted and certified. So, again, very, very strange stuff going on here. Now, Judge Rachel Tanguay of the New York Supreme Court agreed that there's some weird stuff going on and allowed this suit to go forward. In May, she had ruled that the allegations were serious enough to allow for discovery to proceed. In a separate order filed earlier this month, Tanguay said that all discovery must be completed within about 7 months. So, I mean, it's a lot of discovery, apparently, and already there's about 15 pages from SMART, and more very likely to come. And now the plaintiffs are seeking any evidence about how the 2024 election was conducted due to these irregularities that were detailed in the initial complaint. According to SMART legislation's press release, documents requested include information about the voting machines, the voter rolls, the software updates, more on that, hardware, including forensic-grade copies of hard drives, diagrams of all the equipment, including network and Wi-Fi components, and the flash drives that carry election results. Board of Elections has been asked to provide documents concerning any actual or alleged irregularities, errors, problems, or misalignment of election results or voter rolls in the 2020 or 2024 presidential elections, according to documents. They're also they're also asking for security protocols, such as rules for password creation, chain of custody procedures, lists of workers, financial interactions, very detailed, such as vendor contracts and communication with voting machine manufacturers, including election systems and software and testing lab Pro V&V. Now, Smart Elections reported in February that that there was a software update to some of ES&S systems that were not sufficiently tested. Jack Cobb, director of the federally accredited testing lab Pro V&V, was like, hey, whoa, these changes, they were not of any significance, okay? This update changed basically nothing. It was barely a blip. Now, of course, Smart Legislation says they had spoke with a technical advisor who was like, actually, no, this is not a small change, okay? These updates actually constituted a major change and need to be looked into. Okay, need to look into this as to see what the changes actually were. What did they change, and did any of those changes mess anything up? Smart Legislation also asked the Board of Elections to answer questions about modem or Wi-Fi or cellular connections to Rockland County's election systems, and to confirm if it has ever either used Starlink Satellite's direct cell service or a program known as Ballot Proof. Now, Starlink, Elon Musk owns that. Elon Musk gave millions of dollars to Donald Trump's reelection. If they ended up using Musk's service to connect to the internet, I mean, that could be a big red flag here. Okay, that is something that needs to be looked into. Smart also asked if any individual or organization had made any type of complaint or expressed concern about possible inaccuracies in election results from January 1st, 2020 to the present. So, again, what they're asking for is pretty comprehensive. All right. Now, Free Stat said in a statement provided to Newsweek, one of our main concerns at this point is whether the chain of custody of the ballots and the equipment has been robust enough for the public to have confidence in the paper ballots. That is the reason for many of our discovery requests. The Rockland County Board of Elections, who does not want this lawsuit to move forward, as I mentioned, will still have to respond to the discovery requests and, of course, try to answer those questions. The next hearing is scheduled for September 22nd, and the case is expected to go to trial early next year. Now, let's be clear. I don't know, and I'm not saying Donald Trump cheated. I don't have any evidence of that. But there's some weird things in this when you look into it. The drop-off rate, for example, which is described as when voters cast a ballot for one candidate but left others blank or voted cross-party. That right there is really compelling to me because normally there's about a 1 to 2% drop-off rate. Okay? Harris, compared to Gillibrand, in Rockland County had a 9% drop-off rate. 9%. That is bizarre and really high, but it actually gets even higher when you look at Trump versus the Republican Senate candidate. Trump had received 23% more votes than the Republican senator. That's weird. That's very weird. According to Max Bonamente, a professor of physics and astronomy at the University of Alabama in Huntsville, quote, these data would require extreme sociological or political causes for their explanation and would benefit from further assurances as to their fidelity. Again, nobody here involved in this suit is alleging like Elon Musk stole the election, right? With the Starlink and everything. No, they're not alleging that. They're saying, hey, we found these things that are statistically highly unlikely. Why don't we look into this? We would like to do some hand-counted paper ballots to basically confirm that, yes, maybe there was something that was very, very unlikely that actually did happen. Why don't we look into it? Why don't we look into it? And you know what? There's no harm in looking into this. Okay? Now, here's the thing. As far as like, okay, weird, like extreme sociological or political causes for this, I can't think of anything. I mean, for Harris, look, it's not like the protests that were against genocide and people, deciding not to vote for Harris as a result of her unwavering support for Israel and the Biden administration's unwavering support for Israel caused this drop-off. And why do I say that? Well, because those same voters wouldn't have also supported Kirsten Gillibrand, who also supports Israel. Harris and Gillibrand are both members of the Democratic establishment. So as far as that drop-off, you can't really easily explain it, at least not when it comes to that reason alone. Again, these same voters would not have supported Gillibrand if they also didn't support Harris as a result. And so, yeah, it's weird. Now, there's more weird stuff. Turns out beyond the affidavits, many Democrats in the area reported being turned away from polling places after being told that they had already voted and checking ballot tracking systems only to find out that their vote was marked as not cast. And that's not to mention some of the bomb threats and other threats of polling places that happened during the election. And so I don't know what's going on here. I don't know. Hopefully this can shed some light on it, this lawsuit. Again, I'm not saying 100% that all this is nefarious, right? It could be errors, could be very unlikely events, but it also could be nefarious. That's why we have to look into it. We don't know. We just don't know. That said, guys, at the end of the day, I know this is not going to overturn the election. Why? The election's already been certified. Okay? And there is no constitutional vehicle to overturn an election. It's the same thing, like, reason that the 2020 election, right? If they had found, the fraud, there was still, and there wasn't, by the way, there wasn't fraud in the 2020 election. There wasn't Joe Biden stealing the election, right? They still couldn't overturn that election even if they wanted to. And they tried. They tried a lot. They tried very, very hard to do so. And so this won't do that either, okay? So then why do it? Why is this lawsuit important then? Well, I don't know. Maybe secure our elections? Voting machines can be vulnerable to hacks and other things, or they could just mess up. How many times has a software update accidentally broke your machine? Whether it be your computer or your phone or whatever. That does happen. Happens all the time. So yes, I think it is important to get to the answers as to why these results happen the way they were, why these errors, why these irregularities popped up. And more importantly, what can we do to actually fix those things? And if we can't fix those things, well then maybe that means we end up going back to hand-counted paper ballots, which is, again, another option. Okay. Rachel Atwood, with the very kind $2 super chat, says Rebecca Watson did a great video on this topic. I'll have to check that out then. Let's see. Let's see. There's one more here. Where is it? Thought I saw something. Okay. Anyway. Well, let's move on to the next story here. We got the ICE agents, ICE impersonators. As ICE continues their raids across the country, people posing as ICE agents to do crime, they're becoming a real problem. Police in Southern California had arrested a man suspected of posing as a federal immigration officer earlier last week. The latest in a series of such arrests, according to a report in The Guardian. This is as masked plainclothes immigration agents have been deployed nationwide to try to meet the Trump administration's mass deportation goals. Remember, they want to get about 3,000 people a day arrested and deported. And they do not care if you're a criminal, if you're here with prior authorization, they're going to take that authorization away. And in some cases, they'll even deport you if you're an American citizen. Now, one of the impersonators, Fernando Diaz, was arrested by Huntington Park police after officers said they found a loaded gun and an official looking documentation with DHS headings in his car, according to NBC Los Angeles. Officers were impounding the vehicle for parking in a handicap zone. When Diaz asked to retrieve his items inside, the police said among the items seen by officers in the car were multiple copies of passports not registered under the individual's name. Diaz was arrested for possession of the allegedly unregistered firearm and released on bail. The Huntington Park police chief and mayor accused Diaz of impersonating an immigration agent at a news conference. Diaz, of course, denies it, but it ain't looking good for him. Perhaps because his name is Diaz. They would look at him and be like, oh, that guy, obviously, he's not ICE, he's brown. No, no, I almost guarantee that if it were a white person that would, try to impersonate an ICE officer, that might not catch on. So I'm just saying. Now, at a news conference, the police showed reporters papers that they had found inside his car with an official-looking U.S. and Customs Border Protection header. Now, look, this, of course, is what experts have been warning people about. Okay? After agents have been allowed to wear masks and plain clothes while carrying out raids from unmarked vehicles, this is not a stretch. This is not a surprise. Okay? Back in March, masked ICE officials had arrested a Tufts University student outside of her apartment after her visa had been revoked for simply writing an opinion piece in her university newspaper advocating for Palestinian rights. That in itself, I mean, that is dangerously authoritarian. It's unconstitutional. Whatever happened to free speech? Free speech doesn't exist anymore if the masked Gestapo can come in and disappear you off the street. And that's what happened. But it's actually worse because not only have they been doing this to people like Oster, right? But it's also emboldened those who are not ICE to go and disappear people or threaten people with deportation if you didn't do exactly what you told them to do, if they didn't do what you wanted them to do. In fact, in late January, a week after Trump took office, a man in South Carolina was arrested and charged with kidnapping and impersonating an officer after allegedly presenting himself as an ICE officer and detaining a group of Latino men. In February, 2 people impersonating ICE officers attempted to enter a Temple University residence hall. CNN reported that Philadelphia police later arrested one of them, a 22-year-old student who was charged with impersonating an officer. In North Carolina, in that same week, another man, Carl Thomas Bennett, was arrested after allegedly impersonating an ICE officer and then using that disguise or whatever to sexually assault a woman. Bennett reportedly threatened to deport her if she did not comply. In April, a man in Indiantown, Florida, was arrested for impersonating an ICE officer and targeting immigrants. 2 men reported to the police that the man had performed a fake traffic stop and then asked for these people's documents and immigration status. Understand, and there's plenty more. These are the brown shirts. Okay, these are the brown shirts. The people that are doing vigilantism, thanks to the Trump regime allowing agents to hide their identities. I mean, this very well might be by design. I mean, I'm gonna say it's by design, but I can't be sure. I'm gonna speculate. Okay, but and why would it be by design? To intimidate immigrants, and maybe even intimidate Trump's political opponents. I mean, impersonating law enforcement. Yeah. Now, Mike German, a former FBI agent and fellow at the Brennan Center for Justice, told The Guardian last week about the killings of 2 Democratic lawmakers in Minnesota by a man that had dressed up and pretended to be a cop in order to get access. Here's what he said. Federal agents wearing masks and casual clothing significantly increases the risk of any citizen dressing up in a way that fools the public into believing that they are law enforcement so they can engage in illegal activity. It is a public safety threat, and it's also a threat to the agents and officers themselves. I'm not so worried about that last part. That's just me, though, because people will not immediately be able to distinguish between who is engaged in legitimate activity or illegitimate activity when violence is occurring in public. To me, this seems more like not a bug, but a feature. Okay, that's it. I mean, look, ICE agents, legitimate ICE agents, already have exhibited behavior that, if it were displayed by anybody else, would be criminal. Disappearing people off the street, coming up, without the correct types of warrants and just arresting people, waiting outside of immigration courthouses. They're doing all that stuff that would be criminal. And you know what? That's probably why they're wearing the masks. It's why they're in plain clothes. It's why they're in unmarked cars. And why I think that they do not care about impersonators. You know why? Because at the end of the day, it just makes their job of scaring the hell out of immigrants that much easier. Okay. Let's move on to the last story here. We got more corporate malfeasance, as usual. All right. Disabled workers at Amazon are accusing the company of engaging in systemic discrimination, as well as aggressively quashing their attempts to try to organize with each other, disabled workers organizing on behalf of other disabled workers. And not only that, but they've also been accused of using artificial intelligence. Here we go. That they allege do not comply with disability laws like the ADA. They said the company has denied requests for reasonable accommodation in an automated or semi-automated way, and have allegedly repeatedly removed messages and a petition from an employee's Slack channel. A May 31st letter sent on behalf of a group of more than 200 disabled workers to top executives, including Amazon chief executive Andy Jassy, claimed that the company was fundamentally out of step with the federal requirements under the ADA. And again, a lot of this has to do with the return to the office mandate. Now, the letter cited policies related to that, in which the letter said that they were being pushed on disabled workers who had been previously allowed to work from home based on doctors' recommendations, accommodation procedures, and accessibility. Among other issues, it also raised concerns that employee decisions around accommodation were being driven by AI, which again does not follow ADA rules. One disabled corporate employee, and this is all mainly in the corporate offices, okay, not in the warehouses, who had feared retribution for coming forward about these workplace complaints, told The Guardian that they had been fired without explanation over the course of being interviewed for this particular story. So I don't know. I don't know if somebody got wind of this at Amazon and were like, oh, we got to get rid of this guy or gal, depending on who it is. We got to get rid of this person because they are spilling to the press. I don't know. This person said, after the removal of the messages on Slack and my firing, others are now afraid. Yes, retaliation. That's how that works. I talked with them and they're terrified about Amazon doing this, the person said. The employee who was fired was one of the leaders of a campaign to organize disabled workers. An email the person sent to senior Amazon managers on June 6th, which was seen by The Guardian, accused the company of violating federal labor rules that ensure rights to collective bargaining, which they don't like at Amazon, and disability-related rights to share information with others who have a disability. My Slack access, they say, was removed, preventing me from sending updates, coordinating, and engaging in NLRB protected activities, the person said. The Guardian also was provided screenshots of Slack and messages and a petition that appears to have been removed from an Amazon employee Slack channel on disability and accessibility issues. Now, accusations are one thing, but they got screenshots, and now Amazon is like, yeah, we removed those messages, we removed those, we got rid of all that stuff. Why? Well, the company says, well, they're a violation of company policy. Which company policy? Apparently, solicitation? Really, solicitation. Again, this is disabled employees trying to get together to advocate for other disabled employees. And that, Amazon is like, breaks our rules. Solicitation. Got to get rid of it. Sorry. Now, Amazon did dispute the claims that it had retaliated against these employees for seeking to organize on labor issues. Really? They dispute that. Of course they did. In the 33-page letter to Jassy and other senior Amazon executives, the disabled workers alleged that systemic discrimination, retaliation, and policy failures documented here not only violate the ADA, but also erode trust, harm individual health, and compromise the company's integrity. We demand immediate action to reform these policies, foster a truly inclusive workplace, which, of course, Amazon is like, of course, we're very, very inclusive. What are you talking about? Yeah, we hey, we actually hire disabled employees. So what are you talking about? And uphold the rights of all employees. The letter cited internal polls conducted by the group of Amazon employees, which 93% of respondents with disabilities claiming that current policies have harmed them. Another 71% of respondents claimed that more than half of their job accommodation requests had been denied or were unmet, and 92% reported a lack of an accessible job accommodation process. Employees requesting accommodations often encounter a lack of meaningful dialogue. Requests are ignored, denied without explanation, or dismissed via automated systems. Now, of course, Amazon has denied all of this, but you know what? I don't believe them. I don't believe them at all. Amazon is not a good company to work for. They do not treat their employees very well, especially if you're in the warehouses, but also in the corporate building, okay? Workers who spoke to The Guardian on the condition of anonymity were particularly angry about their claims that efforts to organize on Slack were being denied and suppressed. The company is cracking down, and they're very concerned, and many people are being told not to post here, claimed one Amazon employee. Another employee who no longer works there claimed management had dismissed disabled workers' complaints as being, quote, disruptive and unproductive. Oh, of course. And it undermined the first ever corporate union collective bargaining group. Here's the thing. The corporate world hates people with disabilities. They do. I think that should be very, very clear to everyone. Okay? They do not want to accommodate anyone. And the fact that they're allegedly using AI to shut down requests for, again, reasonable accommodation is because they want people to stop making those requests. If they just get ignored enough by these automated systems, then I guess they'll stop making them, right? Again, this reminds me of United Healthcare, who also was caught using AI to deny customer claims. I know, different industry, right? And different usage, but also kind of similar. I mean, you're denying people their rights for claims, and you're also, when it comes to Amazon, denying reasonable accommodation requests, which again should be guaranteed by law. But here's the thing. I do not think that anyone should be surprised that those two corporations and many others, I'm assuming, use AI for things like this. To deny care, to deny accommodations, they already use them, of course, to deny job seekers. In any sort of you send an application to a company, very, very likely, most likely, you're going to be met with an AI denial, an AI generated denial. Even if they have an open position or claim to have an open position, it's very likely that your application is never going to reach a human being. Very, very rare. Very rarely. Okay. And so that's what's going on here. So look, here's the thing. They don't want to do reasonable accommodation. Why? Because, well, it could cost money, for one. And it could also give disabled employees the freedom to work from home. Now, why would that be a problem? Well, because if they can work from home and be just as productive, if not more productive, then, if they were in the office, that might get other people to be like, hey, wait a minute. Why can't I work from home? Why do I have to show up to the office? If you could be just as productive working from home, then why are you making me show up? That's why they're really cracking down. They want people in the office so they can micromanage them. They can watch them like a hawk. They can prevent them from realizing that working from home is a viable option that actually does nothing to lower your productivity. Again, for many, it actually makes people more productive, allows people to be more productive. And they don't have to sit there, because some people have to commute for, an hour, if not longer, each way to go to work. So you're spending a couple of hours, just getting to work. And then, of course, some people do not respond very well to the loud office, areas, and work better sometimes on their own in an office, a home office. It just all depends on the person and their living situation. Okay. But yes, it can make a lot of people more productive. But the companies don't want you to know that. They also don't want to accommodate the disabled. According to a 2023 report by United for Respect, Amazon's warehouse workers had faced systemic barriers in obtaining reasonable job accommodation for disabilities or for the workplace injuries at the company. That again, in the warehouses specifically, especially, there were a lot of injuries. And in 2024, a lawsuit was filed against Amazon for allegedly failing to provide a sign language interpreter to deaf employees at a warehouse in California. Amazon, of course, denied the claim. Pamela Hayter, a former Amazon employee, accused Amazon in 2023 of retaliating against her for advocating for remote work in response to Amazon's return to office mandate. Amazon, of course, claimed that, oh no, she had performance issues. Oh, so that's why you let her go. Oh, yes, performance issues. The go-to response when you want to make somebody who is inconvenient, who could cause you problems in litigation, to disappear. Of course. Of course. Look, at the end of the day, I hope these workers get a win. Not only for accommodation, of course, but also against the widespread use of AI like this. I mean, working from home, more people should be allowed to do it. Of course, the reasons that people, that these companies don't want to allow people to work from home, as I already mentioned, they want to micromanage their employees, but also you have these, big corporate buildings owned by real estate companies that want people to be in the office, to show up. And so they can continue to charge these companies massive amounts of rents. And so we're working together to try to prevent work from home from happening. And so there's all of that. But again, these companies, I don't think they're going to lose. Knowing the courts right now and knowing how much money Amazon has spent and will continue to spend lobbying, buying off our politicians, and of course the makeup of the Trump National Labor Relations Board, I'm not optimistic. I'm not optimistic for a win, but nonetheless, I hope against hope that they will pull out some sort of a win. But if they don't, unfortunately, it's just going to continue to set disability and labor rights back even further, which would not be a surprise considering where we have gone as a country under this Trump regime. So there you go. That is all I have for you today. Bad news, it just comes in waves. All right. You don't like my music says the rights idea for labor is as old as the ages. Tale as old as time, right? Make the poor work for less on the pain of starvation. True. Very, very true. It's not about making, working conditions better so that, workers will be invested in the company and making sure the company succeeds. No, it's about like, hey, you want to starve? Well, come work for our substandard wages, okay? And we can't guarantee that you won't starve, but we'll give you a little bit, as little as we can, okay, to come work, and that's about it. Oh, great, that sounds great, but that is where we are absolutely heading, and in some cases are already there in this in this current work environment in 2025. Okay. Well, anyway, I know. Disaster. VMan29397 with the super chat says, I'm curious with Trump regime going after birthright citizenship. They went after it indirectly with the most recent Supreme Court decision on that. But do I think that they'll go after the Jones-Shafroth Act that gave Puerto Ricans citizenship? My grandpa was born in Puerto Rico in the 30s. Now, I think that would depend. I mean, you did point out how the leadership of Puerto Rico currently is quite pro-Republican, pro-Trump. So I don't know, maybe if that helps them in some way, then they might not go after it. But if it ends up being a detriment to them and their policy aims, then yeah, I could absolutely see them go after that and try to denaturalize people in Puerto Rico. And by the way, they're already looking to denaturalize people all across the country now. It's one of the stories that I didn't get to today, which again is allowed by now the recent Supreme Court decision, which just stops these nationwide injunctions from being used. And so, the purpose is to make it so that it's very difficult for someone who gets denaturalized to be able to sue and stop the denaturalization process. And of course, they're going with crimes right now. They're saying, "Oh, yes, we're just going after criminals, guys." They're not going to stop. They're not going to stop with criminals. And you know that, and we all know that, and that's kind of the point. Hopefully that answers your question. But currently it is an unknown, which I think depends on, again, if they're actually going to go after people that will be helpful to them. If going after them will be helpful for this administration. Anywho, that's it. That's all I got for you. Thank you, VMan29397, and thank you, Rachel, for the super chats. Please like and share the stream if you haven't already. Thank you all for watching. Love you all. See you tomorrow. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, everybody.
Up yours, woke moralists. We'll see who cancels who.